today I'm going to look at why I moved from being the furthest left it's possible to be politically to someone who now finds much of the left unbelievably annoying all the time. The first reason is the just intolerance of the modern left is bizarre and shocking to behold. So it just really put me off. What I mean by that, look at university campuses over the last 10 years or so. The number of instances of speakers coming to give talks from all different perspectives, like feminists who've got the wrong sort of feminist views, conservatives, it doesn't matter. They'll come to give a talk and they'll be met by literally by mobs of people who set things on fire, who smash stuff up, who stand up in the middle of the talk and scream and cry and won't let the speaker talk, who block the entrance to the talk. So there was one the other day where an elderly Jewish couple were trying to attend a talk and Antifa blocked them and wouldn't let them in, which to me strikes me as illiberal rather than anti-fascist. You name it. And then that's also backed up by kind of the academic commentary, the parts of the left-wing media, parts of the Corbynista movement, the radical left section of the Democrats and so on. They all have this view that they can just stop people talking or no platform people they disagree with, which, as someone who basically believes in freedom of speech, which bizarrely is now considered a right-wing thing to do, despite being one of the central tenets of left-wing thought throughout all time, it just strikes me as unacceptable. I don't want anything to do with it. I could understand it if you were protesting against really, really far-right figures on a one-off basis, then maybe I'd have some more time for that. But once it gets to the point where every time someone gives a speech who you disagree with, there's just inevitable, predictable riots and babyish just smashing things up and calling yourself an anti-fascist when actually you're just stopping other people who you disagree with from speaking, is something I don't want anything to do with. And you can see this plays out politically as well. It's more of it's a manifestation of a broader left-wing belief that not that people disagree with you and have a valid but different viewpoint, but rather that any disagreement or any dissent means you're basically evil, you're morally corrupt, or you're stupid. And I think that's an intolerant outlook, and it speaks to a lack of intellectual curiosity and also a tendency to just shut down debate. So I really don't like that worldview, and I find it to be something that I'm quite strongly against. Now, personally, the reason I'm not saying in this video that I'm not left-wing is because I'm reluctant to cede the idea that to be left-wing means that you want to shut down people you disagree with from speaking, because I think there's a long history of left-wing people being quite open towards dissenting views, but definitely not in today's modern left, or on today's modern left, rather. So you can look at, for example, politically as well, this plays out and has led in part to the culture wars that we're living through at the moment, I think. So you can see with something like Brexit. Now, it's okay to disagree with Brexit. I personally wasn't massively in favour of it. I don't really have a strong view of it, but there was a free democratic vote and large parts of the left, but to be fair, along with other sections of the political class and the liberal media and so on, but especially on the left, basically just took it upon themselves to say, oh no, that vote doesn't count. They obviously weren't as open about it as that, but it more or less came down to an undemocratic refusal to accept a vote you disagree with. And that is something which I'm just can't believe is even considered acceptable to say, really. Now, it was a completely fair vote. People voted for something fine. There were elements on both sides who it's possible to take issue with, and I can see why some people are very uncomfortable about things like nationalism or whatever it is that they don't like about Brexit. Some people who are involved with it were a bit racist, but that's not to say that everyone was by any means. But large parts of the left just had no problem painting the entire thing as just a purely racist endeavour, as a result of Russia duping everyone, as a result of low information voters, which is unbelievably patronising as well in itself. Whatever it is, and ultimately they tried to overturn and hold up the result of a completely valid democratic vote. So again, I really don't like that impulse on the left. So one other area that I found particularly frustrating has been the hypocrisy of much of the left as well. So they will speak out constantly about how much they care about patriarchy and the oppression of women. Now, there's a huge debate about whether we really do live in a seriously patriarchal society. I would argue that yeah, women face certain barriers which men don't, undoubtedly. But by any measure, we live in one of the least patriarchal societies there's ever been. But anyway, putting that to one side, the same people who dogmatically argue that that is the case and claim that anyone who disagrees is a massive sexist and so on, refuse to discuss things like the oppression of women in Iran, for example. So there's a serious feminist movement in Iran of people like the campaign to free women from being forced to wear the hijab, for example, which has got a lot of support, or something called White Wednesdays, which you can look up. For example, Mariam Namazi, who is a left-wing secular feminist from Iran, who came to the UK to give a speech against the theocratic regime in Iran, and who was just boycotted, and who they tried to shut down. The left-wing student union, I think it was the Student Union, the Islamic Society, and the LGBTQ Society all tried to get her shut down and stop her from speaking because they didn't like her talking out against Islamism and the regime in Iran and so on. So there's that complete hypocrisy. It's insisting that we live in an unbelievably patriarchal society, comparing the West to the Handmaid's Tale, where women are stoned for adultery and so on, forced to wear religious garments, which obviously isn't the case in the West. Whereas they also refuse to talk about the fact that that actually is the case across numerous Islamist regimes, because they just do not like talking about something which doesn't fit the particular left-wing narrative. And so as someone who believes in universal things like universal human rights for all people, I don't believe in theocratic rule and stuff. I find it annoying to see the left insisting that they are the true anti-racist feminists and so on, when you'll see examples of unbelievable patriarchy and unbelievable bigotry in these different regimes, and the left just will not speak out about them. And not only that, they accuse anyone who does of being racist, even if those people themselves are Muslims, reformist Muslims, ex-Muslims, secularists, left-wing activists who they just happen to disagree with, like whatever. They have no problem labelling people who are speaking out against some of the most oppressive regimes in the world as racist, rather than actually address complicated issues. That also applies with Israel. So it's like, you just have to understand that Israel is just a pariah state. That's it. There's no further discussion there. The only understanding which is available in many left-wing circles is Israel is a pariah, it's racist, it's imperialist, and that's it. When actually it's an unbelievably complicated issue, and there are loads of videos by groups that the left hang out with, like Hamas. Hamas produce videos encouraging their followers to go and stab Jews, not just Israelis, to literally go and stab Jews. There are videos where they encourage all children. They encourage children to go stab all the Jews in the world. That's not a joke. I'll put a link to it somewhere up here. I made a video about it. So again, it's that hypocrisy. I think it's regressive leftism. What Majid Nawaz refers to as the bigotry of low expectations. They don't want to treat these other worldviews as equally open for criticism. The only thing they're happy to criticize is liberal Western capitalism, basically. Anything that's outside of that, they find too confusing and they just shut down criticism of. They also don't mind aligning themselves with those figures, which in my view is just completely disgraceful. If you're aligning yourselves with Islamists, either jihadists or Islamists who oppress women and stone gay people and so on, or kill gay people, then I just don't think, it doesn't matter how you present yourself as progressive, you're ultimately not progressive. Another reason I grew increasingly fed up with the left is because there seems to be a tendency to just constantly adopt a critical outlook and basically complain about the society we live in, even if there's strong evidence to say that things are incredible by historical standards. Being unbelievably ardent in your criticism of our society for being basically fundamentally flawed, corrupt, evil, and to never really speak out about the positives of it is something which strikes me as completely bizarre and regressive in many ways. Now, that's not to say that things are perfect. There are definitely issues with racism, sexism, homophobia, and so on. It's okay to focus on them, but to make your entire worldview centered on the dogmatic insistence that things are unbelievably racist and sexist, that things must be explained through that lens always, even when there's strong evidence that on certain issues a more nuanced understanding is required than just putting it down to racism, is something which is irrational. I don't think it makes sense to be so dogmatically critical of everything all the time, even when there's unbelievably strong evidence that we live in one of the best societies there's ever been for people to live in. Another example of this is development. So the world has seen unparalleled levels of development in the last 30 years or so, but also over the last century or even the last 2 centuries. But in particular, over the last 30, 40 years, by basically every measure, things have got so much better for the average human. Like life expectancy has gone up, child mortality has gone down, access to food, access to clean water, access to technology, poverty levels, literacy rates, all of those different metrics, things have got better. Yet the anti-capitalist left is just devoted constantly to criticizing what's going on. Now, you don't have to be a massive fan of capitalism to be able to accept that, yeah, this has brought about incredible benefits over the last 40 years. The refusal to present things in those terms ever, and the absolute insistence that we must just constantly be criticizing the negative things, is something which, again, I find very strange. And so I'm reluctant to get on board with that. Like, if you really care about humans, you should be happy and you should be trying to increase the amount of human happiness through whatever seems to be the most efficient way of doing that. So those are a few of my thoughts at the moment in terms of why I find the left so annoying. But as I don't want to say that I'm not left-wing or that I am right-wing. I don't really think of myself as ideologically committed to any wing. I think it makes more sense to just approach each issue in a nuanced way and try and understand the different perspectives that are available. And in doing, hopefully form an actually mature adult understanding of what's going on in the world, and to understand that not everything is black and white, which I think, especially on the left, is the tendency at the moment. It's just, oh, there's only one understanding of this, and so therefore anyone who disagrees is evil or stupid, rather than someone who has a different point of view. So that just is my few of my thoughts on why I've moved away from the left. And why doing so doesn't mean that you're a racist suddenly. I'm still as committed to anti-racism and equality as I ever have been. It's just I don't think the left-wing understanding is the only one that's valid. Anyway, that's a bit of a rant. Please subscribe to the channel, give this a thumbs up, and also check out, leave some comments, but not really rude comments, please. And also check out the podcast version of this as well. I'll put a link to it in the show description below. Okay, thanks for watching.